This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon. I'm David Muir in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're interrupting regularly scheduled programming to bring you breaking news at this hour. President Trump is here in Arizona on his first trip outside Washington in nearly 2 months, touring a Honeywell factory that is now producing N95 face masks as he urges the country to try to get back to normal, some sort of normal. He wants this country to start phasing in, they're reopening the regions that he believes are ready to do this, but he knows that even as he signals with his own trip that the country can do this, that it comes amid a raging debate over whether or not this is happening too quickly and whether or not lives are actually being put at risk. Some of these states still have not reached their plateau, and I did ask the president whether or not these states have all met the guidelines that the president himself put out there. And one of the things I talked to the president about were the comments from Dr. Anthony Fauci in the last 24 hours, his very cautious words about moving forward too quickly in reopening the country. Here's the exchange just moments ago. I want to ask you about what Dr. Fauci said last night about the reopening of the country. He said it's the balance of something that's a very difficult choice. How many deaths and how much suffering are you willing to accept to get back where you want to be? Do you see it that way? Do you believe that's the reality we're facing, that lives will be lost to reopen the country?
It's possible there will be some, because you won't be locked into an apartment or a house or whatever it is. But at the same time, we're going to practice social distancing. We're going to be washing hands. We're going to be doing a lot of the things that we've learned to do over the last period of time. And we have to get our country back. You know, people are dying the other way, too. When you look at what's happened with drugs, it goes up. When you look at suicides, I mean, take a look at what's going on. People are losing their jobs. We have to bring it back, and that's what we're doing.
The president just moments ago on his efforts to try to start reopening this country, and it comes amid real debate. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York just today saying this comes down to human life and how valuable that life is in these states deciding when and how to reopen. I do want to get to our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, because, John, that was striking, an acknowledgement from the president that there could be lives here at risk.
And the president has said, David, that this decision on whether or not to reopen and how to reopen would be the most difficult decision of his presidency. But at the same time, he has largely turned that decision over to the governors, made it clear that the governors will ultimately be the ones to make decisions about whether or not and how to reopen their states. The president himself seems eager to move beyond this moment in an extraordinary development today, David. We have learned, the vice president has confirmed that the White House plans to disband the coronavirus task force, the White House task force on this issue, by the end of this month. An extraordinary development considering that we are just now seeing peak levels of infection and of deaths.
And of course, John, this comes amid those two new studies. One is a preliminary analysis from Johns Hopkins, the other from the University of Washington, and both cautioned against a quick reopening of this country, saying it could cost lives, it could double the daily death toll by June, said one study. Another said we could be looking at 135,000 deaths, American lives, by August. I did present the president with the findings of those studies. He didn't discount those numbers, but he did acknowledge that his own estimate of the death toll has grown in recent weeks. The president had been saying 60,000 lives could be lost. Now he is acknowledging that up to 100,000 American lives could be lost. I want to bring in our chief medical editor, Dr. Jen Ashton, with us late today as well. And Jen, the president also making news on the vaccine. There's been so much talk about Operation Warp Speed, his push to have 300 million doses of a vaccine in place by the first of the year. I asked him whether or not he could promise that. He backed off of that, saying he's not sure if it could be possible, seeming to acknowledge the very delicate task it is in not only coming up with a vaccine, but really taking a gamble this far out on which vaccine to invest so heavily in.
Well, David, I think that's appropriate. We have to remember in our toolbox against COVID-19, we have prevention and we have treatment. And when you talk about a vaccine for prevention, past history tells us that it normally takes decades to try to develop a vaccine. Remember, it has to be not only safe, but it has to be effective, and then it has to be scaled up to the tune of hundreds of millions of doses. That has never been done before. So while we have the whole world working on this, You know, those caveats, that type of very cautious optimism / skepticism is absolutely medically and scientifically appropriate.
Dr. Jen Ashton with us here late today as well. Again, President Trump making his first trip out into the country in 2 months, choosing to come to the battleground state of Arizona. I asked him a number of questions about the possibility of 19% unemployment, which would mean nearly 1 in 5 Americans could be out of work. Those numbers expected later this week. I asked him about his handling of the pandemic. He said, I should get credit, though I don't, is what he said. And I asked him about the election now 6 months away as we stand here in the battleground state of Arizona. I said, is he comfortable with the idea that this election could be a referendum on his handling of the pandemic? He said, I am, but I'm not. It was a complicated answer, and we'll have much more on what the president said about the pandemic in this country and about his plan to push forward with reopening parts of this country. I'm David Muir here in Phoenix. We'll have continuing coverage at abcnews.com on your local news for many of you, which is coming up next, and I'll see you right here for World News Tonight. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.